They said she moved in to care for me, to help, so I wouldn't be alone, so I wouldn't struggle. I gave her my bedroom. She said I'd be more comfortable in the guest room, closer to the bathroom. I didn't argue. She changed the locks and told me it was for safety. Took the house keys. Started doing the shopping alone. I didn't think much of it. I thought I was being looked after. I thought I was doing the right thing. But by the end of that week, I was sitting in a cold, dim room, staring at the empty water glass beside my bed, praying I wouldn't die with no one there to notice. When the police finally opened the front door, I wasn't even sure if I was still alive. I only knew I wasn't the one they should feel sorry for. Thank you for sitting with me. It means more than you know. I don't take it lightly that you're giving me your time, especially to hear something like this. I wonder where you're listening from, what your space feels like right now, and if any part of this touches something you've been through too. If you've ever placed your trust in someone who said all the right things, wore a warm smile, but behind it all had plans that left you broken or forgotten, I truly want to hear your story. You don't need to explain everything. You can just say, I stayed alive. And that's enough. If there's more in your heart and you feel ready to share it, my door's open. You know where to find me. My name is Lorna. I'm 78 years old, and most of my life has been spent doing what needed to be done without asking for thanks. I've lived in the same house for over 40 years. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Every corner holds a memory, even the cracked tile by the back door where my middle son dropped a casserole dish the night he told me he was getting married. My husband and I bought this place together when we were young, full of dreams and exhaustion. He was quiet, steady, always fixing something. But he passed when the children were still small, a sudden stroke, no warning, just one morning gone. I didn't cry much back then, not because I didn't feel it, but because crying didn't get the lights paid or dinner on the table. I went back to work the same week he died. No savings, no cushion, just a pile of bills and 3 children who still needed bedtime stories. I took a position at the local post office, sorting mail, standing on my feet for hours, walking to and from shifts in the snow some winters when the car broke down and the repair had to wait. I never missed a shift, never arrived late. I worked 6 days a week for almost 30 years, raised 3 kids on a single income, and somehow, through stubbornness or grace, I kept this house. I paid off the mortgage slowly, made sure there was always lunch in their bags, shoes that fit, and enough to cover braces, summer camps, and yes, even funerals. My eldest, God rest him, died far too young. That loss, that kind of pain, it changes the way your breath sits in your chest. But I kept going. I had no choice. The other 2 needed me. Life moves whether you're ready or not. My daughter Lauren was the youngest. She was clever, bright eyes, fast words, always the one who could charm her way out of trouble. Teachers adored her. She never liked rules much, but she always knew how to smile sweet enough that people forgot to be mad. Over the years, her visits grew shorter. First holidays, then just birthdays, then not even those. I told myself she was busy, that maybe she was building a life too full to fit her mother in. I made excuses like mothers do. I'd sit by the window sometimes with a cup of tea and imagine her showing up unannounced, just like she used to when she needed laundry done or money for rent. But those days had passed. The phone calls grew colder too. Quick check-ins, a few rushed words, and then silence. Then one afternoon, after weeks of nothing, she called, said she'd been thinking, said she was worried about me being alone. She asked if she could move in, not just to visit, but to stay. Said she couldn't sleep knowing I might fall in the middle of the night with no one there. I was surprised, caught off guard really. But I was also tired. My knees had begun to ache more in the mornings, and the stairs felt longer than they used to. So I nodded through the phone and said yes. She arrived 2 days later with 2 suitcases and a determined look in her eye. I remember opening the door, hoping it meant a fresh start, a chance to have her close again, to laugh like we used to feel like a mother again, and not just an old woman in a quiet house. I didn't know then that what she brought with her wasn't comfort, it was control. I thought she was here to help. I thought love had come home to care for me. And that belief, that quiet little hope I let in the door with her, would become the beginning of everything that followed. She moved in on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 suitcases and a purse over her shoulder, wearing a smile I hadn't seen in years. It was the kind of smile that used to get her out of trouble as a teenager, the kind that said everything was fine even when it wasn't. She kissed me on the cheek, called me beautiful, and stepped inside like she never left. I had made her tea, even bought her favorite crackers from the corner store the day before, just in case she came hungry. She didn't touch them, said she was watching her sugar. I offered her my room, the bigger one with the bay window and the softer mattress, expecting her to say no, expecting her to insist I stay where I'm comfortable. But she didn't hesitate. She just nodded and said, "It makes sense." She moved her bags in and closed the door behind her. That evening, I found my old quilt folded on the guest bed, with my toothbrush already waiting on the bathroom shelf across the hall. She told me not to worry, that it was just easier this way, said I'd be closer to the bathroom and wouldn't have to go up and down stairs if I needed something at night. I didn't argue. I just nodded, even though my knees worked just fine and I hadn't fallen once. The next morning, she asked for my keys, said she wanted to get copies made so we both had spares. I handed them over. Later that afternoon, I heard the locksmith's van in the driveway, and when I asked her about it, she said she was getting the locks updated, said it was safer this way, that we shouldn't risk old keys being out there. Again, I nodded. She spoke with confidence like she knew things I didn't. It felt strange, but I didn't push back. I thought maybe I was just being stuck in my ways. Then she unplugged the landline, just reached behind the cabinet and took it out. I asked why, and she laughed a little, said no one uses house phones anymore, and that it was one less thing to trip over. I mentioned that my friend Sheila still calls me on that number. She said Sheila can call her cell and she'd let me know. That call never came. Neither did the next. Groceries started showing up, but they weren't things I normally bought. She did the shopping herself, brought in almond milk and things in boxes I couldn't pronounce. I asked if we had any oats left, and she said we didn't need them anymore. Mail started arriving in smaller piles. Then, not at all. When I asked, she said she had it forwarded, said it was easier if everything went through her now. She was already taking care of the bills, she said, so why not keep things simple? She kept saying that word, simple. Everything was always about what was easier, what was cleaner, what made more sense. I didn't realize until much later that simple, in her world, meant silent. It meant invisible. It meant giving up more than just space. I began to notice the difference in temperature in the guest room. The heat didn't reach the corners. The window was sealed shut, painted over so many times it wouldn't budge. The air felt still, like it didn't know where to go. I was in my own home, in a room that wasn't mine, without my key, without my phone, without my name on anything that used to be mine. And somehow, I told myself it was fine. I told myself this was what help looked like now. I told myself this was love. And that was the lie I carried with me as the days quietly passed. It was a Thursday morning, quiet and gray, with that stillness in the air that usually comes before rain. I hadn't slept well the night before. My legs were sore, and the draft in the guest room made it hard to stay warm, even under the blanket. She knocked on the door gently, popped her head in, and said she was heading out to pick up soup from that place I liked near the park. Said she'd be quick. I told her to grab something for herself too. She smiled, said she would, and then the door shut behind her. I heard the lock turn, just like always. It didn't sound strange then. I just figured she'd be back before lunch. So I waited. I sat at the edge of the bed in my slippers, watching the light move across the floor. I didn't want to nap, just in case she came back, and I didn't hear her. Noon passed, then 2. I got up to check the door, and for the first time, I put my hand on the knob and gave it a real turn. It was locked, firm. I stood there longer than I should have, just staring at it. That's when I realized I didn't have the keys. Hadn't had them since the locks were changed. My cell phone wasn't on the nightstand. I hadn't seen it in days. I walked slowly to the kitchen, but the cabinets were almost empty. No soup, no fruit, no bread. The milk in the fridge was past date. I poured the last of the clean water into a cup and sat back down. I told myself it was just a delay. Maybe she ran into traffic, maybe her phone had died. I tried to stay calm. Told myself not to panic. That evening, I made a cup of weak tea with the last of the water I had. It was lukewarm, barely enough to wet my lips, but I sipped it like it was something better, because it had to last until morning. When night came, I left the hallway light on. Just in case she returned, I wanted her to see I was still up. I laid down, fully dressed, and kept my ears open for the sound of her key in the door. I didn't hear anything. Just the creaking of the walls and the faint hum of the refrigerator trying to stay alive. I told myself tomorrow would be different, that she'd walk in, arms full of groceries, smiling like nothing happened. But tomorrow didn't come. Not in the way I hoped. The sun rose, but she didn't come through that door. My mouth was dry when I woke, and the little water I had left was gone. I checked the pantry again, hoping I missed something, anything the first time. All I found was an old sleeve of crackers, stale and soft, but I ate them slowly, one at a time, as if stretching them would change something. I looked around and realized for the first time how quiet the house had become. No television from the living room, no footsteps above me, no music from her room. It was just me and that stillness, the kind that settles over a space when nobody intends to return. That's when the truth started to set in. She hadn't forgotten me. She didn't get stuck in traffic or distracted by errands. She left. She locked the door behind her, took the phone, and walked out knowing I wouldn't be able to leave or call for help. She left me with no food, no water, no way to reach anyone. I sat on that bed, blanket over my lap, and tried not to let the fear take over. But the ache in my chest wasn't just hunger. It was betrayal. Not loud or violent. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just quiet, calculated abandonment. 6 days. That's how long it would take before another living soul stepped through that door. But on that first night, I didn't know yet what was ahead. I only knew I had to survive long enough to find out. By the 7th day, I was no longer hungry. Hunger turns into something else after a while. It becomes a quiet ache, then a sort of hum in the background, like a far-off train you can't see but still feel coming. What kept me awake wasn't the hunger anymore. It was the cold, the silence, and the fear that I might not wake up at all. My legs had stopped carrying me properly. Every step felt like lifting sandbags. I hadn't made it to the bathroom without holding onto the walls. I was drinking water from the bathroom sink, sips at a time, but even that was barely coming out in more than a drip. I had wrapped myself in a blanket and curled up on the floor near the door, not because it was warm, but because I wanted to be closer if I heard something. Anything. A sound, a footstep, a key. I had almost drifted off when I heard it, a soft knock, like someone testing if the house was empty. Then the rattle of a key in the lock. My eyes opened, but I didn't move right away. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming. I had heard things all week, doors that didn't open, voices that weren't there. But this was real. I heard the door creak. And then footsteps. For a moment, I thought maybe it was her. Maybe she had come back. Maybe there was a reason for all this, and she would cry and say sorry and bring soup like she said she would. But it wasn't her voice I heard. It wasn't her scent I smelled. Instead, a boy stepped through the doorway, no older than 16 or 17, holding a paper bag of takeout. Chinese food, still warm enough that the steam had fogged up the plastic lid. He called out once, a soft hello, unsure if he was in the right place. Then his eyes found me. I was sitting against the hallway wall, wrapped in an old blanket, knees pulled to my chest, lips dry, too weak to even speak. He looked at me for half a second, and in that moment something in his body froze. I saw the bag drop from his hands, land softly on the floor beside him. I tried to say something, even just his name, but all I managed was a breath. He didn't waste time. He ran back outside. And through the open door, I could hear his voice yelling for help. That boy, whoever he was, didn't wait. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look away. He saw a woman in trouble, and he did what most grown people forget to do. He acted. Later, I'd learn his name was Aaron, that the food wasn't even meant for my address. It was a delivery mix-up, a wrong turn, maybe fate. Whatever brought him to my door that morning, it saved my life. He didn't come in with a cape or a badge, just a plastic bag and a good heart, and somehow that was enough. That single moment, a knock, a key, a dropped bag, turned the tide. It cracked the silence that had wrapped around the house like a heavy fog. And for the first time in a week, I felt the sharp edge of hope press through all that fear. I hadn't been forgotten. I hadn't disappeared. Someone had seen me. Someone had cared enough to stop, and that alone kept me breathing a little longer. Just until help arrived. I don't remember the ambulance ride, not fully. Just a blur of flashing lights against the ceiling, the cold edge of something metal under my back, and the hum of voices that didn't sound real. I must have drifted in and out. But what I do remember, clear as sunlight, was waking up in a warm hospital bed, with layers of blankets tucked around me, and a quiet voice at my side saying she was left without food or water. For at least a week. It didn't feel like a sentence meant for me. It sounded like something you hear on television about people far away. But that voice was talking about me. About this body. This life. A nurse sat beside me, one hand gently resting on mine. I remember how soft her touch was, not in a pitying way, but steady, like someone anchoring me back into the world. She didn't speak much, just told me I was safe, and that they were taking care of everything now. I didn't have the strength to reply, but I felt a tear slide down into my ear, and she wiped it without saying a word. Later that day, a woman with short hair and a clipboard came in. She introduced herself as a social worker, but her eyes told me she already knew more than she said. She sat down at the edge of the bed and said my name like it mattered. She didn't ask me to explain everything, just asked a few questions gently, like she was brushing dust off an old photo. Then she leaned closer and said, "We're going to need to file some reports. There's evidence of financial fraud here too. It looks like she's been moving money for a while." That moment hit harder than the hunger. I had been left, yes, but I had also been used. My silence, my trust, had been a tool in someone else's hand. I wasn't just neglected, I was taken from. And not just money. Time, dignity, the comfort of my own home, the right to feel safe. Something inside me, something I thought had withered with age, stood up. Not with anger, not with rage, but with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. I had spent most of my life not wanting to cause trouble, not wanting to make a scene. I had forgiven too much, made excuses for things I should have named. But lying in that hospital bed, hearing what had been done in my name, I knew I wasn't going back to being quiet. I may have been weak in body, but in spirit, I was rising. Not to fight with fists or harsh words, but with truth. With records, with witnesses, with my voice, which had been ignored for too long. I knew there would be calls to make, papers to sign, appointments to keep. I knew it would be a process. But I also knew one thing for certain, I had survived. And now I was going to speak. She came into the hospital room 2 days later, dressed in soft colors like someone trying to appear gentle, harmless. She held a bouquet of lilies, the kind you'd bring to someone recovering from surgery, not someone you left to starve. Her face was set in that practiced expression. The one I'd seen since she was a teenager, the one she used when she needed to talk her way out of trouble. Her eyes were already glistening before she stepped fully into the room, like she had rehearsed the moment in her head on the way there. She walked in slowly, placed the flowers on the table beside my bed, then reached for my hand like nothing had happened. Her voice was soft, with just the right amount of quiver, and she said, "Mom, I just needed a break. I didn't think you'd react like that." She said it like I had embarrassed her. Like nearly dying had been a choice I made to inconvenience her. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, straight in the eye, and said nothing. Not a word. The silence between us was heavier than anything she could have carried. She shifted in her chair, started saying something else. About stress, about how hard things had been lately, but she didn't get far. The social worker, who had been standing by the door quietly, stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She just handed Lauren an envelope and said, "This is for you." Lauren looked confused for a moment, then opened it. I watched her eyes scan the page, watched the color shift in her face. It was a formal notice. An investigation had begun. Financial exploitation, neglect, elder abuse. Words she hadn't expected to see in writing. And they weren't vague. They were detailed, specific. They had dates, amounts, transactions. They had everything they needed. Her mouth opened slightly like she wanted to say something, maybe even cry harder, but the tears dried up before they could fall. She folded the paper once, twice, then set it down carefully on the table next to the untouched flowers, and for the first time in a very long time, she had no words. I didn't yell. I didn't ask her why. I didn't need to, because truth doesn't need a show. It just needs to be heard. And in that room, it had finally been heard. When I returned home, the air smelled different, like something had been lifted off the walls. The locks had been changed again, but this time, they were mine. My name was back on the deed. Back on the account. Back where it always belonged. My neighbor from 2 doors down, the one who always waved but never pried, came by that same afternoon. He brought a ladder and a toolbox, and together we reconnected the landline. The phone rang that evening for the first time in weeks. It was Sheila. She cried when she heard my voice, said she'd been calling and leaving messages, wondering why I hadn't picked up. I didn't tell her everything. I just said I was back. The house had been gone through by the authorities. Every room checked, every drawer opened. They'd removed the small hidden cameras Lauren had installed. One in the hallway vent, one tucked near the corner of the living room, one aimed at the kitchen. I hadn't even noticed them. That's what hurt most. I'd spent days trapped in a home that was being watched like a prison, and I didn't even know the walls were listening. But now they were gone. And with them, the weight in the air started to shift. I opened every window in the house, even the ones that creaked, even the ones that hadn't moved in years. I wanted air, real air, the kind that carries dust and sound and the smell of neighbors cooking dinner. I lit candles in the hallway, the kind I used to light when my children were small and restless. Lavender and cedar. It didn't cover the past, but it helped me breathe again. That night, I sat outside with a cup of sweet tea. Not because it was warm out, it wasn't, but because I needed to feel what it meant to sit in my own chair, in my own silence, and not be afraid of what was coming next. The sky was soft and low. A breeze touched the trees. Nothing extraordinary happened. No apology arrived. No closure marched through the gate. But I was home. And I was safe again. And that, in its quietness, was more than enough. 2 months passed before I heard from her again. Not a phone call, not a visit, just a letter, dropped quietly into the mailbox, no return address, just her handwriting across the front. The same handwriting I used to praise when she brought home spelling tests. I sat with that envelope for a long time before I opened it. Not because I was afraid of what was inside, but because I already knew. You can tell the weight of a letter by the kind of silence it carries. When I finally unfolded it, the message was short. Not an apology, not even a hint of remorse, just a few carefully chosen lines. I've been thinking a lot. I hope you're okay. Can I still be part of your life? That was it. No mention of what happened, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a quiet attempt to slip back in like none of it ever happened. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, and not because I wanted her to hurt. I didn't tear the letter up or throw it away. I placed it in a drawer, with other things that once meant something but no longer hold space in the life I'm building now. Forgiveness isn't something I hold like a prize to give or withhold. It's something I live through. And sometimes, it's not about letting someone back in. Sometimes, forgiveness means you no longer need their voice in the room. You no longer need their story in the next chapter. People think peace comes with noise, with shouting or crying or long conversations full of tears. But mine came like a hush, like the quiet of a house that's no longer being watched, like tea steeping in a clean kitchen, like waking up and knowing I'm the only one holding the keys. My peace isn't angry. It's not bitter. It doesn't slam doors or leave notes. It just closes the gate and lets the wind carry away what no longer belongs. If someone once looked you in the eyes and told you they loved you, then left you behind without food, without water, without even the decency to check if you were still breathing, I want you to know I see you. I do. If you've ever been forgotten in a place that used to feel like home, if you've ever waited for a door to open that never did, or kept quiet about a pain so deep it made you question whether you were the one at fault, I see you. You're not invisible. You're not too late. And you're certainly not alone. Sometimes survival doesn't look like strength. It looks like lying still when you can't move. It looks like counting cracks in the ceiling just to stay awake. It looks like telling yourself, just one more hour, just one more day. And then somehow, you're here. Still here. If that's you, and if this story touched something inside you that you've never said out loud, you can leave a comment. Or just write, "I stayed alive." That's enough. That says everything. And if you're sitting in a quiet place right now, watching this with no one beside you, wondering if your story matters, or if anyone would even notice if you told it, this space is for you. This story is for you. Subscribe if you need a place to come back to. You're welcome here, every time.